Hi, this is Stefan Gonick from EFTalive.com and FindingTheLoveYouWant.com. I'm here to talk about the very important topic of good anger versus bad anger, or healthy anger versus destructive, unhealthy anger. The confusion between good anger and bad anger comes up regularly in my counseling practice with my clients, particularly with clients who grew up with an angry parent. And after a childhood of painful experiences with their parents' anger, they end up concluding that all anger is bad, and they don't really understand that there's actually two different kinds of anger. And this can have a negative impact on their lives in a number of ways, as well as interfere with a very helpful healing process that they would otherwise be able to take advantage of. And I'll talk more about this later. So what is good, healthy anger? Good anger is something that you naturally feel in response to a perceived injustice or unfairness, or when you perceive somebody's crossing your boundaries. And the purpose of good anger, healthy anger, is to help you get in touch with your own personal power center, to get in touch with your internal strength so that you can stand up for yourself in order to let the other person know that what they did is not okay with you, and to have them stop. So it gives you the strength to assert yourself so that you can basically establish a boundary. Healthy anger doesn't usually involve a lot of yelling. It can involve a very serious look on one's face and assertive body language, but except in extreme conditions, you don't have to yell and scream or anything. Your voice may be raised a little bit, but it's more about being strong and firm. Unhealthy, destructive anger, on the other hand, is actually about using either violence or the apparent threat of violence through yelling and screaming and angry movements and facial expressions in order to intimidate the other person into getting them to do what you want them to do. It's a tool for manipulation. It's a tool to try and control somebody's behavior. So as you can see, healthy anger and unhealthy anger are almost opposites of each other. Healthy anger is about setting a boundary and letting the other person know that what they're doing is not okay with you and that you need them to stop doing that behavior. Unhealthy anger is about trying to make somebody do a behavior that you're wanting them to do, whether they like it or not. So like I said, they're almost kind of opposites of each other. So how can this play out for somebody who grew up in an environment where they were subject and exposed to a lot of this, violent kind of unhealthy anger? So what happens for a person like that, since they don't realize that there's actually two different kinds of anger, they view all anger as bad, so they deny themselves the right to have their own anger, to the point where they may not feel anger, or at least they don't think they're feeling anger, they're suppressing it, or even if they feel it, they may not allow themselves to express it. So what happens for people in this position is they're not able to stand up for themselves very easily and assert themselves, take care of their own needs. It's hard for them to have boundaries, things like that. So there's a lot of negative impacts on their relationships in that way. They can be walked over by other people, things like that. Also, since they don't have the distinction between the two kinds of anger, if somebody's doing the healthy form of anger with them, just trying to establish a boundary, they'll misinterpret that as the unhealthy kind, like the parents' unhealthy anger. So they'll overreact and feel very intimidated by that and basically get kind of freaked out. It's important in any relationship to be able to have the healthy form of anger where you're basically setting boundaries with each other. And that can become very problematic for a person in that situation. Now, how can it impact the healing process when you're doing emotional healing work? Well, this brings me to another concept, and that's the concept of the victim experience. You see, when you're a little kid and you experience something painful with another person, you are truly a victim of the situation, which means that you are small, weak, and powerless in that situation. You have absolutely no power. So that is what the definition of being a victim is when you're in a situation where you are powerless. There's nothing you can do. So if you're like 5 years old, you're a little person, the adults around you are big and strong, and you're also dependent on them for your survival. So clearly you are powerless in that situation. Now what happens for people though is that this powerless victim experience that they have, they bring that experience forward all the way up into their adulthood. It stays stored within them around whatever it was that they felt victimized by. So whatever part of their life they had that experience. As an adult, even though they are in reality no longer victims, they're no longer powerless, they're now a full-fledged adult with normal adult power, but they continue to feel like a victim, so they feel powerless. So what can often be really helpful for healing purposes is to, in your imagination, in the healing process, go back to that 5-year-old memory and use healthy anger to stand up to that person who was being hurtful, doing something painful. Because here's a very interesting phenomenon, and that is, it is literally impossible to feel like a victim and to feel anger at the same time. So if you can get in touch with your anger, your healthy anger, and let the person in your memory know that what they did was not okay, and you say it with strength and anger, then that will break you out of that powerless victim feeling. And when I've done this with my clients, they always report that when they have just done this this process where they were successfully able to express their anger to the person in the memory, they report that it felt wonderful, it felt extremely empowering, and they come to a completely different place around it. Okay. Now, however, though, if the person thinks that all anger is bad anger, then it's hard for them to go there and do this and have this healing breakthrough type experience. Which is why I've often had to describe to my clients this distinction between healthy anger and unhealthy anger, which is why I'm sharing this all with you. So I hope this explanation was helpful. One thing I'd like to clarify, by the way, is when I work with clients to encourage them to express anger to the person in their memory, I'm talking about in their imagination, in the special emotional healing setting, with that person in the past in their memory. I'm not encouraging them to go to that person today and go express their anger to them. It's not about that. It's just helping them break out of their victim experience, that powerless feeling. So I just want to make sure to clarify that. So I hope this explanation about good anger versus bad anger was helpful. And if you would like to have access to other life-enhancing audios and articles, I invite you to go to my websites at EFTalive.com and findingtheloveyouwant.com. Thank you.